Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today's story is one that questions the very system we rely on for truth and justice. It's about how a single error, an assumption treated as fact, and a rush to close a case destroyed one man's life. This is the case of guilty without proof, how police got it all wrong. It began on a cold February morning in 2010 in the quiet town of Brookhaven. A young nurse, Sarah Mitchell, was found dead in her small apartment. The door had been forced open, drawers were scattered, and the room showed signs of a struggle. The neighbors called the police after hearing loud noises around 2 a.m. When officers arrived, they declared it a burglary gone wrong. But within hours, their theory shifted, and so did the course of justice. Investigators quickly zeroed in on Sarah's ex-boyfriend, David Clark. They had dated for nearly 3 years before breaking up a few months earlier. To the police, that alone made him the prime suspect. One officer told reporters later, it was obvious who else would want to hurt her. That assumption became the foundation of the case. David was brought in for questioning the same day. He didn't have a lawyer present because he believed he had nothing to hide. The interview lasted nearly 10 hours. He repeatedly said he hadn't seen Sarah for over a week, that he'd been at home watching a basketball game the night she died. His phone records, according to him, could prove it. But the detectives weren't interested in checking them right away. They already thought they had their man. When the police searched David's house, they found a jacket with a small blood stain. Tests confirmed it was Sarah's blood. That single piece of evidence sealed his fate in the investigators' minds. They ignored the fact that David had visited her a week earlier to return her belongings. Something Sarah's friend later confirmed. That tiny stain could have come from that earlier visit, but no one cared. The media soon took over the narrative. Headlines screamed, "Jealous ex kills nurse in cold blood." David's photo was everywhere. By the time the trial began, public opinion had already convicted him. The prosecution presented a simple story. David couldn't handle rejection, went to Sarah's apartment in anger, and killed her. The so-called motive was heartbreak. No forensic timeline matched that version, but that didn't matter. The crime scene had untested fingerprints on the window frame, footprints that didn't match David's shoes, and a cigarette butt with unidentified DNA. But those leads were ignored because the police were convinced the case was closed. After a 2-week trial built on assumptions, David Clark was sentenced to life in prison. His mother fainted in court when the verdict was read. His lawyer filed appeals, but with no new evidence, they went nowhere. The system moved on. Another solved case in the books. Years passed. The world forgot about David, but one person didn't, journalist Megan Ford. She had covered the trial back then, but always felt something was off. In 2018, while working on a documentary about wrongful convictions, she decided to revisit David's case. She obtained access to the original police files and evidence photos. What she found was disturbing. Several pieces of physical evidence had never been tested with updated forensic methods. Megan partnered with a private investigator and a retired forensic analyst to dig deeper. They re-examined the evidence logs and found the cigarette butt still stored in the evidence room. After months of legal requests, they managed to get it tested using modern DNA sequencing. The results changed everything. The DNA didn't belong to David Clark. It matched a man named Kyle Turner, who had a record for burglary and assault. Turner had been arrested multiple times between 2009 and 2013, often targeting homes in the same neighborhood where Sarah lived. But in 2010, he hadn't been investigated for her case at all. Megan published her findings in a detailed report that caught the attention of a criminal justice nonprofit. With their help, David's case was reopened. The police were forced to confront what they had missed. When they ran the fingerprints from the window frame through the national database, they matched Kyle Turner as well. It was undeniable the police had arrested the wrong man. David Clark had lost nearly 9 years of his life because of investigative shortcuts and assumptions. Turner, the real killer, had continued committing crimes for years after Sarah's murder. When David was released in 2019, the courtroom was silent. He stood there, visibly older, his eyes hollow but calm. Reporters asked if he felt angry. His response was quiet. "I'm just glad the truth finally mattered." Those words broke hearts across the country. The aftermath of the case led to internal investigations within the Brookhaven Police Department. It was discovered that one detective had altered parts of the report to make the evidence fit the theory. Another admitted in a review hearing that they were under pressure from superiors to close the case quickly due to media attention. Public outrage followed. The district attorney issued an official apology, calling it a tragic failure of due process. David was later compensated for his wrongful imprisonment, but no amount of money could return his lost years, his job, or the trust he once had in the system. Journalist Megan Ford received national recognition for her work in exposing the truth, but even she said it shouldn't take a journalist to correct the mistakes of an entire justice system. Today, David uses his experience to advocate for evidence-based policing and reform in interrogation practices. He often speaks to law students and police trainees, emphasizing the danger of confirmation bias. How once you believe someone is guilty, you stop seeing anything else. In one of his speeches, David said, "They had no proof, only a story that sounded good enough to close the case." His story has since inspired documentaries, lectures, and reforms in evidence handling policies. This case, like so many others, reminds us how fragile justice can be when built on assumptions rather than facts. A single unchecked belief, a missing DNA test, or an ignored lead can ruin a life. In the end, the truth won, but at a devastating cost. Sarah Mitchell finally got real justice. David Clark got his freedom, and the police learned a painful lesson. Proof matters more than pride. So next time you hear about a case that seems too neatly solved, remember this story. Because sometimes what seems obvious hides a truth nobody bothered to look for.